phone's on mute?
Yeah.
Good morning to everybody in the listening audience. My name is Al Bridges. I'm the host of Body Talk. And keeping with the theme, it's Tuesday, 18th of April, 2023. Again, you're listening to Body Talk on the WMDS No Static Radio Network. Again, this is April Minority Health Month, and we have actually three good guests. The first panel I'll introduce in a minute. We will also have a guest at the 11:30 hour, but I'm going to bring back the two gentlemen that you see sitting here about 5 minutes to 12. Two things I want to remind you of. We have, again, Minority Health Month on April the 27th of 2023 between 5 and 8:30 p.m. The Metro Health System, being led by Dr. Charles Malden. He has a program called the Men's Minority Health Fair. Again, it's April the 27th, 2023. Starts at 5 through 8:30 p.m. It's at each one of the locations, the Metro Health at 2500 Metro Health Drive, the Broadway Health Avenue Center at 6835 Broadway Avenue, and the Cleveland Heights Medical Center at 10 Seventh Circle. You do not have to pay anything. It's free. It's absolutely free. If you want to pre-register, it's 216-957-3862. If you want to pre-register, that number is 216-957-3862. I'm encouraging every black man and man of color to attend this health fair. You get free screenings, everything from your blood pressure. They don't look at your feet. They'll listen to your heart. You can also get a PSA screen. If you're married, dating, or with a significant other, be sure you take your sons, take your uncles, take your father, take your grandfather, whoever you want to take with you. Make it a big event day. After you get your screening, take everybody to dinner or whatever. But please take advantage of the 2023 Minority Men's Health Fair. Let me introduce our first guest here. Basically sitting to my right, the gentleman, his name is Mr. Spencer Wells. And the gentleman sitting to my far right, at the end of the table, is a gentleman by the name of Andre White. What they're here for today, they're going to talk about environmental health issues. We're going to talk about some specific issues, the first one being lead, and then we're going to bring them back and talk about something that's been in the news. It's a national news story. It's also a local news story, but it's a national issue. So the first thing I want to do is they represent an organization by the name of CLASH, and it's CL, all capital letters. CLASH. And would you please, one of you, please explain to the audience what CLASH is? What does that represent?
Well, I'm going to yield to Spencer. He's going to introduce the organization.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you, Al, for having us on. The CLASH is the Cleveland Lead Advocates for Safe Housing. We were formed in 2019. And our goal at that time was to get an issue on the ballot that would require rental housing built before 1978 to be certified lead safe. And while our petition drive didn't get on the ballot, it did encourage Cleveland City Council to pass that ordinance, and it's slowly being implemented right now. But in the meantime, we've taken on some other lead-related issues that we'll talk about today.
Okay, and it's good. I interview a little bit different. You sort of, which is fine. It's fine. You skipped ahead, talked about city council. It's been slow moving.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean by slow moving?
Well, when the ordinance was passed in 2019, there was a 2-year period to get people familiar with what the requirements are and to give assistance to set up the machinery to have owners have their property certified lead safe. So it really didn't go into business until 2021. They small thing called the pandemic interfered with some of that and slowed things down. But in March of 2021, they started the process of trying to register the 80, maybe 100,000 rental units in Cleveland as being lead safe. And to date, over the past 2 years, they've done about 12% of those units, and they're conscious of the fact that they need to ramp it up to come to a real positive coverage before 2028. So we're trying to push them a little bit and say, hire more people, get more money out in the street to help people make their homes lead safe, things like that.
Okay, let's back up for just a minute for the listening audience. Again, you're listening to the Body Talk radio podcast program on the No Static Radio Network. What is lead? Why is lead not safe in homes?
Well, lead is an element. It's on the periodic chart. And one of the effects of lead that we've known about for centuries is that in children and in adults, if it's a really high exposure, lead can cause neurological damage. We're most concerned about lead in children because when children are in that developmental stage, years 1 through 6 or 0 through 6, when their brains are maturing, lead can cause a whole range of neurological problems, everything from symptoms that resemble ADHD or autism, or a lot of stuff gets mistaken for what is really fundamentally lead poisoning, where the lead enters the body and messes around with your nervous system.
So let's, just to help the listening audience here, we're talking about Cleveland primarily. And the housing stock is what, relatively new?
No.
Okay, we're talking about what, 1930, when most of the homes in certain areas were built because Cleveland was part of the industrial boom per se.
Well, that's right.
And a lot of the homes were driven by World War II, the returning vets. They needed some place to live. A lot of people aren't aware that when paint was made, paint was lead-based.
Beginning in about 1920.
Correct. And the federal government absolved all the paint manufacturing companies in a suit that was filed. They absolved them because they said, well, that was just the time. You know, it's just like Kool-Aid. You put a lot of sugar in Kool-Aid, so this is a stretch with an analogy. The government said, we're not going to hold Kool-Aid responsible for everybody's cavities. So they absolved or dismissed the responsibility of like Sherwin-Williams or whoever else who were the paint manufacturers. So let's talk about children. You have a 2-year-old or baby, and it's what they call the oral stage. Children will crawl around, they crawl up on the windowsills and look out the window. If there's a paint chip, they would take it and put it in their mouth. And some of them actually would swallow them. So that was lead-based paint. Can you get infected with lead-based paint outside?
Yes, and usually the way that happens is that, and paint chips is obviously an issue and the most familiar one, but probably more insidious is paint dust. When paint gets old and it gets dried out and dusty, and it's easy to inhale, not just put it in your mouth, but you inhale it, you get it on your hands, you put your hands in your mouth when you're a baby crawling around. And so very often it's hard to detect just by looking at it. The mass demolition, people have been around Cleveland for a while. Remember back in the 1980s, we decided we were going to demolish a whole bunch of houses, and they ended up burying those houses in the basements and then covering up with a little bit of dirt. Well, all that paint got into the soil, and so you find a lot of contaminated soil around from the lead paint. You also get contaminated soil from leaded gasoline, which was going through the engine, through the tailpipe, up in the air, and then down on the ground. So we talk about resources. One is lead paint off the walls, one is lead in soil, and the other is lead in water, where we for years used lead pipes to do the plumbing.
Okay, so you mentioned lead pipes. So the children and adults water running through the lead pipes, they're technically or could be getting poisoned by the lead.
Correct.
You're listening to the Body Talk radio program podcast, and if you are listening, you have any calls, questions, or comments, you can call area code 216-939-5087. We have Mr. Spencer Wells, who is sitting right across from me, Mr. Andre White, representing CLASH, which stands for the Cleveland Lead Advocates for Safe Housing. Let's intertwine some politics here, because you mentioned slow. Right? A rental property is supposed to be registered in the city where you live, let's say Cleveland, because we're talking about Cleveland. Is the registry up to date?
No. In fact, the new Director of Building and Housing, one of the first things she did was to do a sidewalk inventory of all the housing in Cleveland, because she estimated there were at least 20,000 units that were rental properties that were never on the registry. 20,000.
20,000. So, in other words, we have 20,000 properties, and this particular, or people who own these homes are renting them, and they're not, there's no certificate of occupancy, there's no inspection, no nothing.
Correct.
Right, all right. So, we're gonna be policy wonks for a minute, all right? If she did this, she discovered 20,000, what was that bumped against? Did she go to the county to find out who owned these properties? Or she just identified the 20,000 homes that are not registered in building and housing?
It was a sidewalk survey, so they had people go out and walk up and down the street and write down the addresses of places that they didn't know about. And then they did background research at the county to see who were the owners and how to reach out to them.
That was West Reserve Conservatory.
Okay, Western Reserve, quote unquote, did the survey.
Yes.
Okay. So now that we're going to stick to the 20,000, because I personally think it's more. 20,000 homes that are unregistered. So what was done from there?
They're being sent information by mail to come on board and register the properties as rental properties, and then they're subject to the lead safe certificate program.
Okay, you're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Stack Radio Network. If you're listening, you have any questions or comments, you can call it 216-939-5087. Let's just focus on the kids. We're all policy wonks today. Let's just say it's primarily children, school age, and pregnant women that we're concerned about. Okay. Who owns the children in Cleveland? The school age children. And that maybe own is not the appropriate term. Where do the school age children rest?
I'm sorry,
Well, if we're trying to identify who's been lead poisoned, the school system belongs to the city of Cleveland.
Yeah.
Right? So why doesn't the city of Cleveland Public Health Department, with CMSD assistance, say, we'll test every child from the kindergarten, maybe all the way through 12th grade or whatever the cutoff age might be, and have a permission slip, and you put your name and address on top, and there's a box that says owned or rented. Owned could mean you're in the process of buying it, or if it's a rental. If you check rental, then the city would take that information, take it to building and housing, and see if that home is registered in the system. You could also test the children simultaneously. So does CLASH test children first off?
no, we don't.
Yeah.
We're more of an advocacy.
You're an advocacy group. So you're advocating for me, my family, and my little children. Okay? And help the audience here. Is there any legislation in the city council that mandates that every child born in the city of Cleveland, he or she, is lead tested before they go home?
So, actually, it's mandated by the state of Ohio.
Okay.
The state of Ohio says if you live in a high-risk area, you have to have a child lead test at the first year well baby visit, the second year well baby visit, or if you haven't been tested at those points, you have to be tested before you enter the school system. So legally, that's covered. Practically, it is not happening that way.
Now, when you say, again, we're policy guys, okay? Practically, it's not happening this way.
Yeah.
Because either I'm not taking my child in for the well baby check, first one, second year, and so forth and so on. Or the physician, the pediatrician, or nurse practitioner, pediatrician, is not doing it.
Correct.
Okay. So how do we fix this? We're policy guys, you know, and as a policy wonk, I just don't like to talk about problems. I also look for solutions. So how can we fix that piece?
One of the things that Clash is doing this year is we're actually doing surveys of healthcare professionals and parents and childcare professionals to find out what they think the barriers are to getting everybody tested. And we hope with that information we can look for where the gaps in service are taking place and begin to make those connections.
And let's go ahead, Andre. I'm sorry.
Also want to iterate that we're asking the county to look at WIT.
Oh yeah, this is important.
We're asking the county to require that women and children are enrolled in county women, infant and children program are tested for lead exposure, because right now they're not being tested. And the good thing about it is if they do go through the testing, Medicaid will pay for it. So that's something we're advocating on.
And that's a good idea. So that's part of the solution. We'll come back to WIC in a minute. Let's talk about the test, because everybody, do I have to be put to sleep? Am I anesthetized to get the test? Does somebody cut I get my blood drawn? What's the test?
We're doing a health minority health month health fair out on Benwood Avenue, and Metro is sending out a team of docs and nurses to do testing on the spot at the health fair.
Okay.
And they have a little tiny machine. They draw like a pinprick of blood. It takes 10 minutes to get the results.
So it's not really an invasive test. I want to make that clear to the listening out.
Yep.
It's just a prick like you're sewing, paper cut, boom, 10 minutes, you're fine. What is an elevated lead level?
Well, the CDC standard, Centers for Disease Control, the standard is 5 micrograms of lead in a deciliter of blood. That's a very small amount. CDC has just reduced that level to 3.5, down from 5. And we're hoping that pretty soon, the state of Ohio will come into compliance with the new standard of 3.5. But everybody hastens to add that there is no safe level. In fact, the CDC says they're not even using the term elevated blood lead level because they think any exposure to lead is potentially harmful.
Have either one of you or has Clash looked nationally and comparing Cleveland, let's say, to a Pittsburgh or to St. Louis or Detroit? Is Cleveland higher lead level poisoned, or is it somewhat equal across the country?
Cleveland's the highest in Ohio. And Ohio is 2.5 times the national rate. And that's for the children that get tested.
It's just for the ones that get tested.
That's right.
So we call it scientific wild assumed guess, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How many children do you, on a swag, do we think haven't been tested in Cleveland?
The best data that we have, the best most recent data we have is that for children that go to a well baby checkup at Metro, only about 55% of them are being tested for lead.
So what's happened to the other 45%?
Not lead testing.
Well, they're pediatric standards. The
Yeah.
Academy of Pediatricians
Yes,
have a
that's
standard of certain things you're supposed to do, and it's almost like check, 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 check. They just overlook that block that says,
well, and this is exactly why we're sponsoring this this study to figure out why aren't more children getting tested at the pediatrician's office, or why aren't more, what are those barriers? And then, I mean, one of the things we've heard is, a well baby checkup is frustrating and moms get fed up and time goes on and they don't do it till the last thing. And so, baby's cranky, they just take them home.
That's not good.
No,
that's not good.
We're not even sure it's right.
Andre mentioned WIC, which is women, infants, and children, and you have to. There's a certain poverty level where you qualify for.
Correct.
I think what you suggested, or what class wants to do, is, I don't want to use the term mandate, but suggested that all the families who qualify for WIC, because that means they have infants and children, they should be lead tested. This is just a guess again from a policy perspective. I don't know if we can really mandate that, because it's almost, I'm going to go back, let's say maybe 11 years, where they were mandating in Mississippi that women who qualified for food stamps had to be sterilized, and they were actually doing that. Now I understand, I truly think that's a great idea. The policy people, we're not going to be on that group right now. The policy people have to work out the nuances of saying, well, if you accept WIC, you have to do these 5 things. And women on WIC, unless they have changed it, have to come in, certify certain things that they've done, and continue to receive the WIC coupons, which gives them certain formulas, baby cereals, and food for themselves. You're listening to the Body Talk Radio Network, and today, sitting next to me, I have Mr. Spencer Wells and Mr. Hunter White talking about environmental health issues, primarily the lead crisis.
Well, at one time, they were testing at WIC for babies, but I don't know what happened. Maybe Spencer can explain.
Andre, this is weird, but Andre and I were out at Harvard Community Service Center last summer, and this young woman comes up to us and says, "I'm glad you're doing this because I work at WIC." And she said, years ago, we were testing or making sure that everybody that came into the program had been tested for lead. And she said we had to stop because we were finding too many cases.
I can believe that, because the powers that be, whoever that is, if you show a significant problem, that becomes their problem. Now they have to address it.
Yeah.
If you show an insignificant problem, see, we're doing well.
Right.
The one thing that I'm concerned with, and let's go back about maybe 2 minutes, when I mentioned who owns the children. And again, it's the school system, CMSD, belongs to the city of Cleveland, responsibility of the mayor. When we gave that example, I gave the example, I recommended that to the city of Cleveland. So you could almost test every school-age kid in Cleveland, and also...
We can answer that.
Sure.
Case West Reserve had a nursing program, and they were doing that type of work in the Cleveland Public School District. But, go ahead, Spencer, what happened to the program?
Well, it was funded by a foundation grant, and the money ran out, and so they stopped doing it.
Well,
while they were doing it, Al, they were turning up rates of 50% of the folks in kindergarten and pre-K that had been exposed to lead. In some neighborhoods,
right.
Glenville, Slavic Village, Buckeye, those areas that were traditionally neglected in the 70s, those areas were turning up astronomical numbers.
Okay.
And when the money ran out, they stopped doing it.
Well, obviously that's not a good thing, and foundations, their money does run out, or they say we're not going to fund this program anymore. So again, we're going to put back on our policy hats and our suit and ties and fancy bow ties or whatever. So let's go back. And if you want to, you can. I don't want to hurt class by any means. Why doesn't the city council address this? If this is what you believe in and support, you fund it.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't city council do this? Not only, and more so for class, because you're advocates. Go ahead.
We tried to get we tried to get Case Western Reserve to go back to city council. We told them we'd go with them to get the money from city council to do it out of the money, the emergency money they had because of the COVID thing, the American Rescue.
The ARP money.
Yeah, the ARP money. Nobody at Case was interested in doing it.
Now, I'm not gonna blame Case. I'm gonna lay half of it on Case and half on city council. It might have been the frustration they were having, and I'm not saying their program wasn't successful, okay? They might have gone to city council and said, well, we have $22 left, and whatever foundation is not gonna fund us for the upcoming year. What will you do? And they probably nothing, because obviously they did nothing. It would be nice if the legislative body in this town, and they're concerned about the citizens, and more so in this case, children and pregnant women and some adults, obviously.
Can I say this real
Sure.
quick? One thing that the city did do that we advocated for was the mobile vans. We Cleveland received 2 mobile vans about a year ago, and they're not in production right now, but we're waiting to see when they're gonna put these mobile vans in the community. But they're supposed to be 2 mobile vans, and we asked them to do lead testing, community events, park outside the center, community health centers. So they did step up to the plate for that.
Okay, you're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network. You gentlemen don't have to move. We're gonna take like a 25, 30-minute break. We're not gonna disappear. We have to make a phone call to a young lady by the name of Miss Lacy. She's going to talk about the importance of CPR. So as we make this call, I'll let you know, we can keep talking until the call goes through here. See, one of the things that, so class, in my opinion, and what I've seen, heard, is successful. Well, no.
We're trying.
Well,
We still got some issues to
the ideal
figure out.
in any program, the ideal is 100% of everything. If you reach that, then I'm going to join you, because every foundation in the city is going to be chasing after you. You look for, if you can have 85 to 95 or 92% identification rate, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not going to put this on Clash. You already pointed out certain programs only identify 50%. The healthcare networks in Cleveland, which is known as the healthcare mecca of the country because of. Good morning, caller. May I have your name and where you're calling from, please? Still having a technical problem. Yeah. Caller, please call back. Hello? Who am I speaking with, please? Hello? Caller, we're having a technical problem. We'll work it out. Please call back in about 5 or 6 minutes. Let's go back to our discussion here. So let's say that right now, and I'm making up the number because I'm not going to put you guys on the spot here. Let's say you're at a 70% success rate now. Okay. What do you need to do to get to that 82 to 90% success number?
I think we've already talked about it, but maybe talk about it in a different way. So I think childhood lead testing ought to be available in lots of different locations to accommodate lots of different kinds of problems that families run into. And Andre talked about taking the city's mobile vans, set up an appointment with XYZ daycare, and the daycare center knows when they're coming and informs the parents, gets all the paperwork done.
Good afternoon, caller. Welcome to the Body Talk radio program. May I have your name and where you're calling from? Hello, caller. Caller still can I hear? Let's go ahead.
Go out to the daycare center, set it up, have the kid, they get dropped off in the morning, mom's there with them, takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe to do the test and get the results. Or do it in the end of the day when mom and dad comes back and picks them up.
Okay.
And there are a lot of childcare centers, but it would be an easy way. It would be removing the barrier of having to take a day off work, go out to the doctor's office, sit around in the waiting room, fill out a lot of paperwork, and then be told, yeah, you got to go out to the lab and get this work done.
So you do it, I think that's a great idea that both of you recommended, the child care centers. So child's tested early or late in the day, right before mom and dad or guardian picks them up. They're given a piece of paper that says below 1.5 or
3.5.
3.5, excuse me, below 3.5 or 9.5. If it says 5.5 or 6.5, is there information on that slip that says immediately take your child to the emergency room, take them to a pediatrician?
Probably a lab to get a second, what they call confirmation text. And that then triggers the health department to do follow-up and say, well, where's that lead coming from so that we can stop the explosion?
Okay, and once a home is identified as lead infected, well, let's go back. How is a home identified as lead infected?
Right now, it's the child. The child identifies the home.
So nobody comes out, if I have rental property and inspects prior to getting that occupancy certificate?
No. What should be happening is if you're on the rental registry and your property was built before rental property built before 1978, it's the owner's obligation to have the inspection done and then turn that information into the city.
So what happens if I don't, I'm the homeowner and I don't have that done?
Yeah, we've been trying to encourage the city law department to actually start to find people that are not in compliance, and that's a very slow process.
So I'm not lost here. I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm hearing, I don't say what you're saying, what I'm hearing, the city really doesn't care.
We're not gonna say that, we're just gonna say that it's in a slow process.
Okay? You can call it a slow process.
Yeah, we'll call it a slow process.
Okay.
Well,
I'll try to call it a slow process.
Let me agree with Andre to this extent, and I don't want this to get over his head. But he's right. We have had a situation where, to the best of our knowledge, no property owner has ever been taken to housing court for a lead issue, even where there's like proof out the door that there's lead in the property, until the Bibb administration. Now the Bibb administration's trying, and that's progress.
Okay. Well, I'm not here to put either one of you on the spot to say that one administration isn't doing anything or one administration is trying.
This is multiple administrations.
Well, it goes.
Anything.
I mean, this goes back to Moses Cleveland if he was ever mayor here. Okay. So I'm just deferring to my background.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like if I'm trying to do the spreadsheet, but I never turn the computer on, or I turn the computer on, but I never open up Excel. But I can tell you, I'm trying.
Well, the Bibb administration, during the campaign of the mayor candidacy, we interviewed every mayor candidate, and we suggested a lead czar, to be in charge of the departments to make sure that lead issues are taken care of. So he did appoint a lead czar.
Okay. And who's the lead czar in the city of Cleveland, if you know?
A woman named Karen Detmer.
Okay. And I'm assuming she has a wrestler background to be the lead czar.
Yep.
Okay.
And her job is primarily to coordinate among all the different agencies that touch the lead issue. So we're talking about health, building and housing, law, water department. What am I forgetting?
Building the house. Did you say
Yeah,
building
building and housing.
That's about it.
Just building a house.
But coordinating among all those agencies so that they're all moving in the same direction.
with all these properties, okay, and I'm gonna be the dismissive or irresponsible homeowner that I'm renting out my 1 or 6, maybe 10 properties, and I don't have the lead survey done. And these families that I rent to, they become lead poison. What, and if you know, what responsibility do I own for that child's health?
This is a real tough issue, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that the lead manufacturers have gotten an exemption, at least in Ohio, from any liability for poisoning from lead paint.
Okay.
Now the owner's loophole is if the owner can truthfully say that he or she did not know there was lead in the property, that's usually a defense against any kind of liability action. The trick is, this is the dream strategy. If they're required to do the inspection
And they didn't do it.
and they didn't do it, they can't claim they didn't.
No.
They can't claim, they didn't comply with the law, or if they did it and they lied about it, like, I don't know of a problem, they're now much easier to hold responsible.
Okay, so as
I'm
of,
not saying it's perfect.
no, well, again, nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
There's some ideal, and I'm gonna use both you gentlemen's statements. It's a slow process. There's certain things, especially when it comes to individuals' health status, from a prevention and or from the treatment perspective. If I decline the test, or if I decline the treatment, then that's on me.
Mhm.
But if I'm put into an unsafe environment, knowingly or unknowingly, because of the law, ignorance is no excuse under the law, if I remember the whole phrase. The homeowner is responsible. Now, what does lead poisoning do? Like you mentioned earlier, there's some neurological issues. And again, I'm not saying this is all based upon lead here. That might explain some of the behavioral learning issues of the children in Cleveland.
And also especially young adults. We cannot connect it, but it's been studies about violence on behavior of young people, and it might have came from lead. So that's the issue right there.
Okay, well, again, I'm not a physician, all right? And I don't think you are.
That's why we said that there was some studies.
Right, and I'm
There's pretty solid evidence.
Correct.
Of the connection between childhood lead poisoning and adolescent engagement with the police.
Well, I'm just using one aspect of ADHD. You have opposition behavior
Hi, Ms.
disorder.
Lacy. This is Marie from
They
the
might-
Radio.
That might
calling for
explain
your
some of the
outreach.
behavior of
Okay,
the children.
give me 1 second, please.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and we're talking about 14 and 13-year-olds. If you gentlemen can hold on, I do believe we have Miss Lacy on the line, our CPR expert. Can you hear me, Stacy?
1 second, let me get this over to you.
While she makes the connection. See, one of the things that, if you look, we're just generalizing here, but a little bit specific because I don't have the exact number. If you look at the issues going on in the city of Cleveland, we're talking about 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old boys and girls doing things that I didn't ever dream or think about doing.
Just take an example of the 17-year-old that shot the cop over in Old Cedar.
Oh, we're doing a technical adjustment here.
Yes.
Stacy, can you hear me? Hello, Miss Lacy, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Lacy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
I'm fine, and sorry about the technical issue that we were having earlier. Well, no, I promised you 11:26, and we're a little bit late. I appreciate you taking time away from your other responsibility. We're gonna, and I don't wanna say quickly, cause I'm gonna have you back on eventually, okay? I'm gonna have you come to the studio.
Yes, sir.
Explain to the audience what CPR is.
CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which is basically pushing hard and giving breath to save a life. And it's something that I am very passionate about, and I work directly with AHA or American Heart Association to do that.
Okay, and at what age should people become certified in CPR? What's the earliest I can start?
Well, at this point, I know you and I are a little older than some. And at one point, we used to be able to do CPR in our health classes and things like that. So I believe that every person, even as little as our 6 and 7-year-olds, should have the opportunity at least to learn CPR and at least learn first aid, because you're dealing with so many different types of children in a different generation, that emergencies happen, and little people need to be prepared as well.
Okay, and let's create a scenario. Let's say that Spencer or Al and Andre, we're caregivers at home to our loved ones, our parents, or whoever. Should I be trained in CPR?
Yes, you should be. And I believe that honestly having the knowledge and knowing something is better than the person that knows nothing. We are inadvertently going to panic as soon as an emergency happens, because that's our natural inclination. However, if you are trained and you have at least some insight on what to do in an emergency, that eases some of the anxiety, and it kind of puts you in focus, and you're able to support that victim as quickly as possible. Okay.
Now, I understand you have your own training firm. If you could give us the name, please.
Yes, it is Life Compressions, and I am located, actually I'm through the city because I kind of come out to everyone and visit with them. So I can book classes individually, or I do work with groups as well.
Okay. Now, how does the audience get in touch with Stacy?
If they like to direct, you can always call my cell phone, which is 216-403-7472. That's accessible, and as well as my website, which is lifecompressionsllc@gmail.com.
Now, you mentioned that you do individuals and groups. Let's do I'm going to say the hard part first. You do groups. How many will you train in a group at one given time?
We try to make the classes no more than 10 people at the most. I prefer a class of at least 8 to 10. The reason I say that is that it gives us the opportunity for people to work in groups and in pairs, and also for them to get very familiar with the equipment and feel comfortable.
Okay, and present to the audience, this takes what, 6 days, 6 hours, or 6 months to do? How long does the training take?
Normally the classes are anywhere depending on what you're taking. So if you are a basic life support provider, which are my nurses, my doctors, my dentists, a lot of my healthcare people, those classes are normally 3 hours. Okay, especially for renewal and what have you. My people that are, I would say, layperson, you're coming on board, you're taking the initial class for a heart saver, first aid, and CPR. That class is typically 7 hours, because there's 4 hours for first aid and 3 hours for CPR. However, I try to make it as interactive as possible and make it fun, so we don't feel like we're dragging or spending our whole day just learning and not having fun. I try to make it a fun situation. Okay, now you mentioned first aid. You teach me how to put a Band-Aid on? Well, we can teach you how to put a Band-Aid on. We can support you on understanding people that are diabetic, what to do in a diabetic situation, what to do if a person is bleeding or they've cut themselves, if a person has an amputated body part, a finger, or I've had somebody that cut off the top of their finger. That can happen. We can also support you in understanding how people suffer from strokes, what to do if a person is in anaphylactic shock. So, for instance, if you're allergic to bees or you're allergic to seafood and you have an EpiPen, those are all things that we can train you and support you on.
And now you mentioned, see, you're using all these fancy terms. What is an EpiPen? Explain that. What is the EpiPen for the audience, the listening audience?
So, for those that are listening, a lot of times we have people which always make me laugh when we teach the class, and they say, well, Miss Stacy, I'm just a little allergic. Okay, well, you can't be a little allergic to something. I always laugh and say being a little allergic is like being a little pregnant. Either you are or you're not. Right. Okay, now the circumstances being is that with anaphylaxis, that's a circumstance where a person who is severely allergic to something, it could be seafood, it could be bees, it could be nuts, because that's an allergy for so many people, where you need a device, and it's called an EpiPen, epinephrine, that you actually shoot on the side of your leg to support that person. Because of being in anaphylaxis, their airway will close, so
So we're going to go back to choking and vomiting more so for just a minute. We're at a restaurant, and I'm sitting there eating with dining with somebody, and they grab their throat. What should I do? Do you teach that?
Yes, we do. We do teach choking, and we teach choking for adults, children, and infants. What I remind everybody is that if you're in that process, if you do know how to do that, which we call that the Heimlich maneuver, which is on behalf of Red Cross, that's Heimlich. American Heart Association says abdominal thrust. It's the same thing. We're going to teach you how to be able to get a person to expel whatever they have is lodged, and we can support an adult who is age 8 and older, or we can support a child, which is 1 to 8, or an infant, which is someone under the age of 1.
And I know, I'm not saying don't give us the details. It's tough to explain how you do CPR when somebody can't see you.
Correct.
Do you do, what is it, 20 breaths and 1 compression now, or 2 compressions?
Actually, it is, the guidelines have changed in a couple of years. It is 2 breaths and 30 compressions, and you are required to do 150 compressions in 2 minutes. So I tell everybody it's 5 sets of 30, because 30 times 5 is 150. And now, after COVID and prior to COVID, which is so wonderful about American Heart Association, I believe they were a little bit ahead of the game. We were teaching hands-only CPR because people were so afraid to breathe for others without a proper device, which makes sense. So now you have the option to do hands only, which is strictly doing compression. As long as you are doing those and doing them correctly, you will still able to save a life and support life saving.
Okay, so when I start the compressions, if I'm in the house by myself or somebody's there, I just scream to them to dial what number?
You're going to dial 911 immediately.
Okay.
So that you have support and someone on the phone to help you, as well as someone coming to you to back you up. Most of the time, which is so wonderful about our system here with EMS and our 911 supporters, a lot of them are trained, and so they can kind of help you to walk yourself through it if you are a lay person who's never taken a class, and you can still support someone.
Okay, so 911's been dialed. Can I, now that I've dialed 911, can I stop the compressions now and say, wow, let me sit down and go back to finish watching Oprah?
No. As soon as you call 911, more than likely that dispatch person that's on the phone with you is going to ask you, what do you see and what's going on? And they're going to try to assess the situation for you without being present. In the process, they're also going to release 911 and EMS to you to come out to support you. They're immediately going to tell you to get next to that victim, get down on the floor with them. You always want to find, I tell everybody, that V. So a thumb in between the nipple line and slide, and that's exactly where your first hand should be. You want to put your hands together, and you want to immediately start compressing on that chest to try to get support to that heart.
Okay, we have Miss Lacy on the phone talking about CPR. And again, Stacey, if you could give everybody the name of your company and how they can reach you via your website and phone number.
Sure. My name, of course, is Lacy. The name of my company is Life Compressions. Our direct business line is 216-403-7472. My email and website is lifecompressionsllc@gmail.com.
Now, I have to be candid with the audience. I did take a training with Stacey, and I passed. She actually gave me I passed. She just didn't give me a certificate, didn't pay her under the table. I noticed that on your website and also in our training, see, I have to play like I don't know anything here. What is an AED?
An AED is an automated external defibrillator. So it is the machine that says clear, and it shocks the victim. Now, those are not always readily accessible everywhere. I remind everybody, probably because I do this so often, I'm always aware of where I am and who has them. So I can tell you that Walmart has them, Target has them, Costco's has them. And you're not really aware of it until you actually start taking the classes, and you become very aware of who has the equipment, who has the first aid kits, and who has what you need, God forbid there's an emergency.
Did Ohio pass a state law that the AEDs are supposed to be placed in gymnasiums or schools?
I'm not sure about the state law thing with that, but it is something that should be present. Now, what I've noticed more, and which I so love, is that people are becoming, especially with the young gentleman that recently had the incident, the football player, people are becoming more and more aware of the need for an AED and how quickly it can support life saving. So for those that are available, there are also people I understand that are doing grants to be able to support those that are looking for that. And I do work with my training center, which is here in Garfield. which is through Craig. He is a AED distributor. So if there's someone that is looking to purchase an AED or get training with that or create a relationship, Craig is amazing and he can support you on that.
And I'm just going to ask you a scenario question. On Sunday or whatever day people they make their worship day, should churches be trained in CPR and also have the AED available prospectively?
Yeah, actually, I work with a couple of different organizations, especially religious organizations, who have nurses on staff or a team member within the church itself, and they have asked us to come in and to support them, just so that they're able to support their parishioners and the people that are present.
Okay, let's go back to this AED. Does it have those big paddles and I stick the paddles on somebody, 500 volts, and your people in the room, I say clear?
Actually, no. What actually happens is that the machine does work. It's real. What we need to know and what we would teach you in our class is that AEDs are only utilized on adults and children. You never, ever, ever shock an infant. Okay? Even when you open the actual AED itself, you will only receive 2 sets of pads, which will be pads for an adult and pads for a child. And what's so wonderful about the machine is that it has pictures on the pads to tell you where to stick them. The machine is a 1, 2, 3, which means you cut it on, you listen to what the machine tells you to do, and you press the button. It's just that simple to be able to save a life.
Okay, and just for clarification, CPR/AED, choking, the Heimlich maneuver, is that considered part of the BLS or basic life support?
It is. So what happens is that with basic life support, these are more of my team approach providers. So these are my nurses, my doctors, my dental staff, medical assistants, things like that. They work in a team capacity, so they're never alone. Their program is a little bit different in that they are also checking for a pulse, and they're focusing more so on life-saving technique versus my heart saver class, which we actually have a class just for first aid and just for CPR to support those. Those are my people that most of the time I'm working with group homes, foster parents, general healthcare workers, or people who are anticipating getting into the healthcare field.
Okay, you're listening to the Body Talk Radio program on the No Static Radio Network. And we're going to go not far off the grid here. Since we talked about BLS, ALS, Advanced Life Support, what, and you don't have to get into too in depth, what is ALS?
So ALS actually gets into intubating people that are have a obstructed airway. It goes more to my ER nurses and things like that. Those people that work more so in trauma. You're dealing with a person who could be bleeding at the same time, had a gunshot wound. That's on that side. Okay.
Again, Stacey, would you please give everybody the name of your company, the phone number, and the website? We're not finished. And let me explain why I do that. I ask the guests to give their information because I might transpose the numbers or mispronounce the name. So if you transpose your own number or give the wrong website, that's on you.
Totally fine. You're fine. My number, of course, is 216-403-7472. And my name is Stacey Lacy. And the company is Life Compressions, LLC. Our email is lifecompressionsllc@gmail.com.
Now let's share with the audience about your background. How long have you been doing this? You just started this, yesterday?
No, I've actually been in healthcare for 25 years. My background is in cosmetic dentistry and facial reconstruction. I am a phlebotomist. I'm a coder and a biller. I'm a chemical dependency counselor by the state of Ohio. I wear a lot of different hats. My background in learning this was that I was in healthcare and in working in the dental trauma department. We see a lot of different traumas and a lot of different emergencies can happen. Anxiety is high. People do not necessarily like the dentist. And we've also seen a lot of accidents and incidents with children. So that propelled me into going into teaching. And when I started teaching, I did it for a long time for Bryan and Stratton and for Remington College. And so at that point, I was asked to kind of do it independently. And I started a company about 10 years ago, and I've been doing it independently for some time.
Now, and you mentioned team approach, because usually, let's just use a dental office or a physician's office. There's normally the doctor there or the nurse or his or her medical assistant. And if somebody faints, we'll use the dental chair because they just got the epinephrine, right, the stick, the Novocaine, and they just pass out. The team approach, if nobody panics, the doctor generally won't panic, I hope. It's the medical assistant. He or she's, oh God, he's passed out. And the doctor says, calm calm down. I'm gonna start this. Go out in the lobby and call 911, whatever the case might be. That's a good thing. One of the things that's interesting, you mentioned, and I like the fact that you talked about dentists. When I was in the Navy, I actually pushed to have dentists trained in ALS, well beyond the oral surgeons. And it was the dentist, one of the dentists, the early ones we trained, who did the triage in Grenada. He did the triage and saved several, I'm gonna call them kids, several of the Marines and Navy personnel who were injured in that explosion. If he wasn't trained in ALS, he just would have been standing there because the GMO, General Medical Officer, was actually wounded in the blast and the corpsman were killed. So let's go back to what you do again. So you'll train, you'll come to a family's home, or the family will come to your location and you'll do the training?
I've done some families. I've had a family approach where I've had perhaps it's now they're taking care of a caregiver or grandma or mom or dad or someone is now ill. And so they're going to be the responsibility of the family. The family has decided to take that on versus putting them in a facility. And they may have a caregiver that comes in. I've had family members who request that, hey, Stacey, can you come in and just teach my whole household? Where they learn how to take care of a person that's bleeding, understand diabetes and things like that. Well, if she faints, what should we do? If she does go into a seizure, how do we handle that? I'm more than happy to come in and support it. Sometimes when it's in your home too, it gives them a little bit more comfortability where it's like, okay, this is someone we love. This is a place where we'll always be, and we know how to move in case there is an emergency.
Okay, so if I'm taking care of, let's say, my mom, can I do CPR on her bed? Or do I need to put a body board, or do I have under her, or do I need to move her to the floor?
No. CPR should always be done on the floor. We never want to do CPR in a bed or a chair or anything like that. There's no recoil to the chest. So if you have a person who is in a bed or in their chair, they must be taken out that chair or bed and put them on the floor immediately.
Okay, so let's stay in the home here for just a minute. Let's go back downstairs on the first floor.
Okay.
On the refrigerator, you normally have your cereal and crackers on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the side, should I post what mom is allergic to, or medication she's taking? Or
I would always do that, especially if you have someone coming in that is a caregiver, or so that everyone is always on the same page. So one of the biggest things I teach and I complain about so often in my classes is that communication is lacking. Everybody needs to know what is going on at all times, and everyone needs to be honest about what they can and cannot do in an emergency. So if you are the person that says, you know what, I can get mom out the bed and I can get her on the floor, but I'm just not comfortable dealing with blood, that's fine. Let me know that. So then that way we go, you know what, she can help get her out the bed. I'll assist with the wound, but you go ahead and you call 911 and you support. We're all supporting, we're all communicating, and we're saving.
okay, and help me out here because I don't know too much. So we're doing the compressions. I call 911. They keep the compressions going. The EMT technicians show up. I have the front door open. Hope nobody's taking my TV. They show up. They go upstairs or come downstairs, and they say, "Well, let us move out the way." They're not throwing you out the way, but move out the way, please. They do what they need to do. Maybe they utilize the AED on her. Maybe they don't, because they say, "Well, you've done a good job. We're going to transport her." What should I give those technicians when they're taking my mom out the door?
First of all, I will tell them thank you. I think so often we forget to say that.
Okay.
Please be thankful and be thankful that you have people that are trained, that are present and pleasant, and willing to do whatever they can to save your victim or your family member. So I definitely will tell them thank you. And then ask them, is there any additional instructions that you have for me? Be willing to listen, be willing to support, and let them lead once they take over.
Okay, should I give them a list of moms or dads or whoever's medications?
Yes, well, more than likely, you'll probably have more than one person there with you. So if that's the case, someone else may be asking you what happened. They may be asking you for the story of what's going on. That person can iterate to that EMS person what's going on, what medications they're taking. Maybe, hey, yes, she was sitting in the kitchen and then she blacked out and she fell out, while the other two technicians are supporting getting her on the gurney and getting her in the bus.
Okay, so again, I'm not trying to take anything away from somebody being out in the restaurant or whatever, because there's a lot of issues that occur in a family home. And you're sitting there with whomever, and you see them just roll back or their eyes disappear. and they're going into syncope, which is a fancy term for fainting, if I remember correctly. What should you do then?
If a person is fainting, the biggest thing we always tell everybody is that there's got to be an underlying situation. So what we would normally want to do if they faint, lay them on the floor and elevate their feet. You always want your feet higher than your head. Blood flow from your feet should go back to your head. And then what we want to try to do is to ask that victim, what's going on? Is it that you started work this morning at 6 a.m. and now it's 11, you didn't eat any breakfast? Maybe you're feeling you're low on fuel. Is it that you're taking new medication that you failed to disclose, and that medication makes you feel a little indifferent today? Those are all questions that we want to ask and find out what's going on so we can take that out of the equation. But if it's beyond that, we do need to call for backup and call for support. I have no problem calling 911.
Okay, just a couple more questions. What's the signs of stroke?
Well, I tell everybody, strokes occur due to the fact that blood is supposed to flow through our bodies freely. And when it doesn't flow freely, there has been a blockage somewhere. So you'll have people that frequently may say, I recently suffered a stroke. They walk fine, but their speech is off. Okay? Or it could be that they talk fine, but their gait is off. Paralysis has set in on one side. What I remind people is that strokes have no age limit. I recently had a kid come in that was 13 years old with a stroke. So when you have a person, I tell everybody, remember the acronym FAST. Face, arm, speech, time. And you want to immediately think about those things and call 911 immediately.
Okay, could you repeat that acronym really slow, please?
Okay. It's FAST. So face, arm, speech, time.
Okay, and dial 911 as quickly as possible. And
yes,
again,
sir.
What's your name? I forgot your name. Could you tell everybody
My
your name?
Lacy, and I work with Life Compressions, which is my company. My direct phone number is 216-403-7472, and my website is lifecompressionsllc@gmail.com.
And I'm like Columbo. This will be the last question. If I call you today and I want you to schedule, or I want to schedule you to come into my home, do the training for 3 people, or a company of 10 people, or a religious organization of 30 people. I know we have to break that up. How far are you scheduled out right now?
Well, right now, it's usually within 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
So if you can let me know what we're doing, how many people I have, either I can add you to a class that I have a few people, we can add extra students. If you say, you know what, Stacey, I just want to do an individual class with me and my husband and my 2 kids, that's fine. Let me know. We can coordinate and look at the schedule and find something for you. I've worked Sundays. I've done that for some people, and I also do some Saturdays to accommodate. So we try to make life-saving as simplistic as possible and make it flexible as well.
Just one more question. Will you come in? I'm certified for whatever reason, or the organization, or religious institution. Will you come in and do an assessment and say, well, you need to have this first aid kit, you need to have an AED, or I recommend you have this, recommend you have that? Do you also do assessments?
Yes, sir, we do. And actually, when we come in, we always ask everyone, where is your first aid kit? Are you aware of where your first aid kit is located? Let me take a look at it. I know with child care, there are some specific things that need to be requested and required in that child care kit in order for them to be certified and signed off on. So I've done that for some. I've had a hair salon that had me come in and actually certify the barbers and the hairstylists. And they actually have a dispensary in their hair salon with their first aid kit and additional things to support their clients. So whatever it is that you need, we will help you. We will support you to do life-saving techniques.
Okay, and I am going to let you go. Just share with the audience your name again.
Oh, Stacey Lacy, and I'm at 216-403-7472.
And I thank you for your time, Stacey. And again, I'm going to have you come in the studio.
Yeah, you guys have a really great day today.
All right, thank you, Stacey. All right, bye-bye. Okay, gentlemen, let's go back to our interview here. And I hate to say we're going to finish up on lead here, okay? So class is the advocate. You're out there pushing for the people, power to the people. Okay, I read about that in the 60s because I was just born in the 80s. So you're advocating for the people, and I understand I'm going to use the terms that you both use. It's a slow process, not on your part, but on whoever. Who else do you work with? Who else does is Clash a separate entity, or do you work with, let's say, the American Heart Association or the American Academy of Pediatrics? Are you solo? I mean, I know it's more than you two.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wanna take that one?
You tell the organization, but I wanna go back to, not only do we work with Cleveland, but we're also trying to get the county on board. And there's some questions that we would like to address, but he'll talk real quick about the individuals that we work with.
So, a great question is that, I think this year more than we have in the past, we're really reaching out to other organizations that have parallel interests. And a good example is, the Black Child Development Institute, where, we're working with them around some presentations, to childcare providers and to parents in childcare, doing a training this Saturday at the Huff Library, for instance. They're also helping us with doing a survey of what the barriers are to child-led testing, and they're going after an EPA social justice grant, and we're written into the grant as a partner supporting agency. So that would be an example, but we have lots of partnerships like that.
So let's make this the last question for Led, if I may. How can people donate to you if you accept funds? Or how can people donate their time to you?
On our website, we have, at the bottom of every page is how to join on, so you get our information, weekly update, how you can spend some money on us, and how you can get more information, just try to reach out.
And excuse me, you had a comment, Andre?
I want to talk about real quick the 5 questions for county, but Spencer, give me your website.
Yeah, we need the website.
It's www.clashcle, that's CLASHCLE, .org.
.org. And is there a phone number somebody can dial specifically?
216-359-1060.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. We did a public comment with the county councils, Hope County's council, and there were 5 things that we wanted the county to look at or address for childhood led, and we said you can do this without hiring a consultant. One that we said was required that mothers and children enrolled in the county women, infants, and children with program were tested for lead exposure. Then we also asked, required that all children in foster care are tested for lead exposure. 3, required that foster homes and rental properties in the city of Cleveland are compliant with Cleveland Lead Safe Certificate Program. The 4th one was required that foster homes that are located outside of Cleveland receive a lead risk assessment, and working with the county board of health to provide financial assistance to the foster care family. And 5 was conduct lead risk assessments in all county-owned or operated facilities that serve children between the ages of 0 to 6. And we're asking them to do these things that are not that expensive, or you don't have to hire, but these are things that you can do to help county municipals to fight and prevent lead.
Those 5 asks are great. I think what Clash is doing, because it's just more than you two for Clash. So if I'm leaving somebody out, I'm not trying to give you two all the credit here. Okay.
And you should be aware that everybody that's a member of Clash has their own specialty, and my job is to make sure everybody's informed about what everybody else is doing.
Oh, you're the super coordinator.
We call them communication.
So just pull the mic a little bit closer to you, Spencer.
Sorry.
See, one of the things, and the 5 asks are good, and I think what Clash is doing is excellent. Let's just say there's 300,000 homes in Cuyahoga County. You'd almost need an army of lead, and not you, because you don't do the inspections. The government entities would need an army of lead inspectors, or housing inspectors, I guess would be a better term. The county would need to have a robust system to enter the data and to cross match it between the city and the county.
But most cities are already doing that, like in Warrensville. Warrensville has a rental register. So what they do is before you go out, before you can rent or remember before you could put a person inside that building, the inspectors come out and they do lead testing and they check the property and everything before they get that certificate out.
Oh, that's great.
Some cities already set up.
Oh, no, I mean, that's good, and I'm not trying to say, I know where Warrensville is, and that's good that Warrensville and maybe some other municipalities are doing that. And I'm not saying Cleveland isn't, all right, or is not. My parents would be mad if they
Slow
say it
process.
isn't. Okay, very slow process. See, the one thing that, and I'm saying this, you guys didn't, I don't see where the city of Cleveland, although slow, they don't have that back piece to ensure that the homeowner or the landlord is registered. They're still renting their properties to anybody, unless say there's children involved and pregnant women and families. You don't know. We don't know. And that's the piece that there's that gap that has to be addressed. So let's just switch topics here for a minute. Again, this is Minority Health Month, and that helps explain, because lead poisoning affects everybody. It's almost like cancer. Cancer affects black, whites, Hispanics, Asians, etc., etc. Let's talk about environmental health. Okay, minority health. Again, environmental issues affect everybody. I understand that you two think, I don't know if it was class or just you two, but let's say class, because I don't want to offend anybody, because I know you're going to meet with them sometime this week, and I don't want you to get jumped on. There was an incident in East Palestine where a train derailed, and that train derailed and had what in it? What was it?
Vinyl chloride.
Vinyl chloride. And vinyl chloride is basically a product that's used to produce PVC. Okay. Train derailed, and the cars, the tank cars or whatever, began to leak. And what happened in East Palestine?
So there was a big outpouring of a lot of interest from the elected officials to say, let's go in there and get some control. And there were some dubious decisions made. I mean, I think you got to wonder about why they decided to burn it off instead of, put the fire out. But it got a lot of national attention.
Well, you skipped ahead, because that was question number 1.5 I was going to ask. I'm assuming Ohio EPA, presuming, I shouldn't say assuming, they said, you can burn it off. So it was a controlled burn, because it was the fire department there. They had the water ready. And anytime you burn, there's two products that are produced, well, several products depending on what you're burning. One, you get carbon dioxide. That's usually the black smoke. Are you aware of any other chemicals that were released on that burn? If you don't, I'm not trying to catch you. Got you. Okay. If you don't know, that's okay. I went back to my chemistry books. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I went back to my military training. When you burn that product, you get several byproducts. One is the monoxide. All right, that's the black smoke. You get a product called phosgene. You know what phosgene is used for? It's a chemical agent that was used during World War I.
Mustard gas.
Yeah. Mustard gas. And it killed 85,000 people in World War I. It's banned by the Geneva Convention, supposedly. Okay, it's banned. Now, one of the things that, and again, this is based upon reading, and I don't know if you two made it to East Palestine. A lot of people said, well, there's this odor in my house. The mustard gas can penetrate drywall, because drywall is nothing but paper, compressed paper. And I'm not saying they're going to die, because mustard gas affects your pulmonary system. Okay? And I was surprised that EPA said you could burn this. Okay?
Ohio or U.S.?
Ohio EPA. Okay, Ohio EPA. And I'm not trying to lump them together because there's two separate incidents here. Let's talk about Ice Shulman. What was that?
So that was a it was a metal foundry byproduct of the main byproduct was lead.
Right.
And the lead was in two forms, as we understand it. One is they compressed it down into bullion and they sold it as a product. And the other was lead dust, which they had some long discussions with a whole bunch of regulatory agencies, including the city of Cleveland, about what was happening to the lead dust that was created there. But when it blew up, they weren't doing anything about it. It was everywhere.
Okay. Now, I'm not trying to defend Schumann here. Let's, for a minute, make the world perfect. Most of these foundries collect lead dust in bags. It's bagged, and some company comes and picks it up and appropriately disposes of it because they have the EPA license, whatever. But when you have this explosion, the dust went everywhere. Now, from my understanding, you two went on site.
Not on site, around the site.
Okay, you
We
were.
don't want to sound like we trespassing.
Yeah, no, we know. We didn't want you to go above or below the yellow
Right.
tape.
Right.
And I can admit you two are not glowing, but you're smiling.
Right.
So you went around the site. What did you do around the site?
Well, we were doing a couple of things. One is trying to figure out where the impacts were, just trying to get a better understanding of the geography. But while we were out, we were also taking soil samples to see where lead dust might have gone. And one of the interesting things that we found out was that it happened that on that day, all the air monitors, both EPA's and City of Cleveland's, were not operating.
Now, when you say air monitors, are these mounted on telephone poles, stop signs, or somebody came out and said, "Darn it, I forgot to put the battery in"?
No, there are apparently, and we don't have all this data yet, but there are apparently, there's one City of Cleveland monitor, and we think it's on top of the tire company.
It's a tire company right around the corner from Schumann.
Okay, where is Schumann? Is it in
So on
Beechwood or Pepper Pike?
Alexander Road in Oakwood Village.
Okay, all right.
It's right just north of the casino.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I just wanted to give a landmark.
Yep.
You listen to the Body Talk Radio program on the No Static Radio Network. If you have any questions or comments you want to ask our two guests, Mr. Spencer and Mr. Andre, you can dial 216-939-5087. So go back to these monitors that wherever they're located, on top of some tire companies.
Ohio EPA told we were on a call with Ohio EPA, and I don't know whether you picked this up, but they have 2 or 3 other monitors that we didn't know about.
Yeah, I didn't.
And they weren't turned on either.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, it wasn't turned on.
Till
Until the next day.
Till the next day.
Till the
Okay.
next day.
Before we just pull the mic a little bit closer to us.
I'm sorry.
So they were paying Charlie or Charlene $50,000 a year to flip a switch, either remotely or they had to drive out and climb the pole and turn the monitors on. The monitors weren't on. Can they tell you when the last time they were turned on?
Well, we're doing a Freedom of Information Act request to the City of Cleveland to get the data that was a month before and a month after.
Mhm.
That'll give us a much better idea of what, when that monitor was operating. And we're not sure how to get the Ohio EPA information, except that they didn't turn it on until the next day. How long it was supposed to be on it, we have no idea.
Just then when it was turned on, they said there was no exposure to the residents, after the next day.
Well, I don't remember the exact day. And again, was the wind blowing at 90 miles an hour?
The wind was pretty hard, but more to the point is, lead's a heavy metal.
Yes, it doesn't just blow away like
And
flour.
And the newspaper reports for that day said that people observed stuff falling from the sky. Debris falling from the sky. So if you didn't have the monitors on till the next day, it's unlikely you would have figured out that there was lead coming out.
Okay.
There's also two different kinds of monitors. There's a monitor that does pushes the air through a filter, where you can go back and test the filter. And there's a newer form of monitor that all it does is measure the size of the particulate that's in the air. We don't know which kinds of monitors there were either. I mean, this is all pretty much wrapped in mystery.
Okay, so I'm just one of these speculative investigators. The monitor wasn't on. We don't know what kind of monitor it was or is. Was there really a monitor there, or was it just a metal box and said Ohio EPA, City of Cleveland?
No, they
just empty.
Well, they told us that there was. We know there was a City of Cleveland monitor.
Okay.
And we know how to get those records. They told us, at least we understood from what they said, that they had monitors also, but that they weren't on either.
Okay, now just a personal question. Oakwood, City of Cleveland. Why does City of Cleveland have a monitor out there?
This is really interesting. The City of Cleveland Air Pollution Division of the Health Department,
Which is environmental health,
is the air pollution monitor for the whole county.
Okay, I can understand that, but the monitor wasn't on.
What?
And I thought in certain jurisdictions, and I'm going back sometime, I thought certain jurisdictions, the county health department had responsibility through a memorandum of understanding, let's say with the city of Oakwood, we will do, as an example, we will perform certain health functions for you. You can function as your quote unquote health department. Okay, so the city of Cleveland was out there. You might not know, it's just me asking a question. When was the last time that monitor was on?
We don't know. We're going to be doing a freedom of information request to find out what happened the 30 days before and the 30 days after.
All right.
And that'll tell us when it was on and when it wasn't.
That's why we did the soil samples.
Okay, well, that was question 2B. Soil samples.
Yeah.
Did you do soil samples?
We did.
And those came back negative.
The soil samples were really interesting. Right immediately adjacent to where the explosion was along Alexander Boulevard, the lead levels were in the 2,000 to 3,000 parts per million range.
Okay.
4,000.
With 400 being the risk level.
Okay, wait a minute. You said they were at 4,000 and the risk level was at 400.
Correct.
So they were 10 times that amount.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just want to be sure.
That was with samples we took about 15 days after the explosion.
So, yeah, 10 days, 15 days.
And then we went out again 30 days after, and they were still at that level. So if you're walking down Alexander Road, you're walking right past that embankment that leads up to the building that has 8-10 times the risk level for lead exposure.
It helped the audience and me understand. So 4,000, way above the 400 acceptable level. Did Ohio EPA notify the residents?
No.
Okay, let me say that. Pull the mic up. Close. Let me ask the question again. Did Ohio EPA notify the residents up and down Alexander Road that the risk level is 10 times what it should be? They might not have put it as eloquent as I am. It's at 4,000 parts. No letter, no postcard.
Correct.
No FedEx, no Amazon delivery.
No. And to add to that, and again, I'm reflecting back on a conversation we had with them last week. They didn't do any lead soil testing, and in particular, and I'm going to pass this off to Andre because he's eloquent about this one. They didn't go on adjacent properties.
Okay, now wait, you're using a term that a lot of people don't understand unless you took geometry. What does adjacent mean?
Next door.
So
Okay.
Next door.
So Andre, Andre is an expert on this one.
We're not gonna say the company, but they're next door to I. Schumann, excuse me, is a company that does excavating,
Mhm.
and they have this big dirt mountain. And we asked them, have anyone been on that property to do soil tests, because they transferred that soil to different construction sites.
Okay, that's not okay, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
And the young lady said, that's interesting. We'll look into it.
Well, no wonder my corn is growing already, and the tomatoes and the watermelons I
We
plant.
actually, Andre and I went over there and we asked them if we could test on their property because it's immediately behind where the explosion was. It was
Right next door.
about 100 yards away.
100 yards away.
And where it was not even 100 yards from where we were getting the exposure levels in the thousands. But nobody ever tested any of that soil that's sitting on their property that's being hauled out by the truckload.
You're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network. If you have any questions or comments, you can dial area code 216-939-5087. How far did you go up from the explosion? Did you go 2 doors, 5 doors, 2 blocks,
Yes, all of them.
and still 4,000?
No, not all the areas. Just those two areas were 4,000.
Okay.
Now, we did go south towards the racetrack, and we were seeing levels in the 170 to 250 range, which is above normal, but not at the EPA threshold of 400. The interesting part of that is we've been doing some research on the EPA standard of 400, and it has not been reevaluated for many years, and it escapes me for a moment, but for instance, the state of California has reduced the hazard level from 400 to 80.
To 8 or 80?
80.
Okay. Thank you.
And we were finding levels in the 120, 150 range in residential areas right behind the mall area there. That's just
North
Village.
Now you said EPA. We're talking about Ohio EPA?
Ohio.
Okay.
This is Ohio.
Oh no, this is the standard is from US.
US, okay.
Yeah.
And is that a pass down to the states? I'm assuming it is. Okay. And so I'm still befuddled here. They didn't notify the residents of the risk?
When we talked to them last week, they said that it was the responsibility of the Oakwood Fire Department to determine if there was a risk to the community.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put the Oakwood Fire Department on blast. I sound like a kid. Did they take samples?
Not that we know of.
Well, you guys sound like a choir. You're both saying the same thing, not that you know of. So you can't notify somebody if you didn't do anything. 0 + 0 = 0. You don't need an Excel spreadsheet nor a calculator.
And we also asked Ohio EPA about the workers, about testing the workers to see if they were exposed by lead, and the first responders. And once again, they said, "Oh, that's a good question. Wrote it down."
I'm just asking. There's not procedures or policies at the Ohio EPA level that says when there's an explosion in a foundry that generally has lead, there's not a checklist that Al comes out with and says, question number 1, okay, what was the name of the building? Was anybody injured or killed?
Well, there was someone killed.
Well, I know that. I'm just going down my bogus checklist here. Nobody came out and did that from Ohio EPA?
Not that we know of.
And there is an emergency, what do we call it, emergency management plan that's supposed to be activated when you have some type of emergency. And we don't know the day.
The emergency emergency plans generally are at the municipal level. The fire department, whoever. They pull out, okay, this was an explosion at a foundry, this was an explosion or at a hospital, I hope that never happens. And they pull out that 2 kit specifically for
Yeah,
that.
we actually have a copy of that.
But they didn't, and I'm not saying Oakwood, whoever they are. Nobody used it?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Apparently not.
Did you,
I didn't want to lose it.
did you have an opportunity to speak with any of the residents? I'm not saying you told them to be, I'm not gonna make this out to be lost in space. Warning, warning, like the robot would do. What did the residents say? The neighbors who were adjacent to this plant, maybe 4 or 5 houses up and down.
It's our understanding that a group of residents went to the Oakwood mayor's office with concerns. We don't know what happened as a result of that. They haven't been in touch with us. We fielded a bunch of phone calls and we said, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. But I think by and large, people were unaware that there was a problem other than there was a lot of smoke and a lot of sirens, but they didn't know there were, hazardous chemicals in there.
And again, I applaud you two what you did. If you don't inform the public of the risk, there is no risk.
Yeah.
All right. So Ohio EPA. At what juncture can the US EPA come in? Do they have to be called? You have to send an email, meaning the Ohio EPA?
Yes, Ohio EPA, our understanding is US EPA couldn't get involved until Ohio EPA invited them in.
Okay. That's not okay, but all right.
We were in touch with US EPA in Region 5 out of Chicago, told them of our concerns. We are assured that they raised these issues with Ohio EPA, but we don't know what the result was. We believe that US EPA is in contact with OSHA. OSHA is the OSHA is the Occupational Health and Safety Agency, and trying to track down if there were exposure issues for the people that were in the plant or who were first responders. And they were doing, they sent a letter to all the daycare centers in a 3-mile radius.
That's the US EPA.
The US EPA did, and then made some site visits to inform them of the dangers of lead without specifically referring to what happened at the plant. Their report was that some people asked them about what happened at the plant. This was after there were some news stories. And that they're doing follow-up work, doing training. US EPA is going to be doing training with some of those child care centers.
So generically, without saying it was related to the explosion, the US EPA is treating this like an atypical lead exposure in a home.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming or presuming they recommended in this letter, we're encouraging you to have the health department or you tell the parents or guardians, inform the parents and guardians, to have your child tested for lead.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I understand there's some HIPAA requirements here, issues. You don't have to identify, you can say child number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without any name or address. Okay. And you do that for the workers, same thing for the firemen. Okay. Who's doing this follow-up now, this coordination piece based upon the explosion?
I can tell you what we're doing.
Okay.
And we're a little handicapped in that it's just a couple of us have time to work on this, but we're going to be doing the Freedom of Information Act request to get more data. We are doing a records search of all of the communications between the Schumann factory and the city air pollution people. There's been a lot of letters go back and forth about lead between those two entities, some of which we have.
That was prior before the explosion.
Planning for what would happen if. And then the other thing that we're gonna be setting up is a meeting with the county emergency coordination staff to see what were the plans and what do they need to do now. Those emergency plans are supposed to be updated with citizen input on a regular basis. We're gonna sit down with them and say, what's going on?
You also, and just some suggestions, you might have already done this without presenting, you might want to ask for copies of the tabletop exercises they've done. Because when you work and when you have companies such as Shulman, which is not there anymore, or other companies in the area, you do tabletop exercises. So if this happens, this is how we would respond. And sometimes they actually do an on-site drill simultaneous or after the fact.
We asked EPA about the communication.
Mhm.
You know, what happened? What was the breakdown of the communication with the community and the companies and the
Right.
management plan? What happened? What was the breakdown?
And there is a significant breakdown. We're going to come back to just a minute before I forget, because I'm getting younger as the days go by. You also you might want to ask for the MOU copy between the city of Cleveland and Oakwood, the original, or any updates to it, that they were monitoring the air, right? And I'm presuming maybe the city of Cleveland was doing it for pro bono, which is a fancy Latin term for free. There should have been reports given to Oakwood every time the city pulled the samples.
We've seen some of that correspondence, and Oakwood is always copied on it, but we want to see it all.
No, you should see it all. What I'm saying is maybe if the city of Cleveland started monitoring, let's just say in 2020, hypothetically, and what's the requirement? When do they pull the samples and send the report to Oakwood? So every month or every quarter, they should be doing this, but let's say it's every month. So you should have 12 reports for every year between 2020 up to that explosion. But since there were no batteries in the monitor, somebody forgot to turn the switch on. There's no reports. So when did Oakwood stop receiving reports?
Yeah, we think that the city of Cleveland was inspecting inside the building as well.
Okay, so you should see those reports.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm presuming you requested those. I'm dumbfounded here.
Get in line.
And I'm, have you gone back since then?
Oh yeah.
And
We did the second soil test.
okay, and are they still high?
Not as high, because it's rained a little bit.
But so now it's washing to the.
There's a creek behind Schumann's that comes down the hill and into a sewer under Alexander Boulevard, and we've been curious about where that water goes. But it's clearly piped out of the creek into the ground, into the sewer system.
Well, let's talk about the adjacent properties for a minute. So the lead's been washed into the soil because it's rained. We haven't had any heavy snow here in Cleveland. Is it safe for me to plant anything?
No.
My grass is probably growing like crazy.
The whole area around there is businesses.
Okay.
And we tried to do some sampling at some of the businesses where we could get access from the sidewalk. Again, not trying to go on their property. And we did not find high levels, but that may have been a factor of those areas had pretty thick mulch, and that in the time that it took us to get out there, that a lot of that surface exposure got absorbed into the mulch and into the.
Okay, and you're listening to the Body Talk radio program on No Static Radio Network. You're pulling soil samples and you're doing night air samples. How long does it? What's the involved process to do soil samples besides digging up some dirt and hopefully nobody's watching, put it in a plastic bag and run away?
This is real high tech. We have little plastic test tubes and a little spoon, and we spoon the soil into the test tube, put the lid on, and then we send him to a test lab.
Okay. And how long does it take for the test lab, depending on, do you put stat on it or?
I think we've been turning the batches around in 3 days.
Okay, that's good. Where I'm not confused, I'm disappointed that nobody's notified the residents. Maybe they did that in the meeting with the mayor, but nobody notified anybody.
I don't think the residents know exactly what's going on inside. I assume it. What kind of products they're making, they don't know how much they're releasing, because they release 160 pounds, is it per year?
Yes. Yes.
About 160 pounds of lead into the air.
They're licensed to do 160 pounds.
And I'm presuming that's safe under somebody's standard.
We think that somebody determined that. We got that data from US EPA.
So when they got the permission to do that, they had to come from the Ohio EPA?
US.
That came straight from the US EPA.
Yeah, and we also, you mentioned this earlier about the dust bags.
Mhm.
We think, we're reading the US EPA reports correctly, that they're hauling a ton of dust a year out of the factory into a landfill out in Toledo.
And
Well, that has to be approved landfill.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
And they also store lead on the property. So when the explosion happened, the lead, when the area that blew up, did not affect the area that they supposed to store it.
And
We don't know where to store it at.
Yeah, this is not a cover for the company. They didn't know the factory was going to blow up.
Correct.
So they might have stored so many bags until the company came and picked them up to take them to the landfill. I'm presuming somebody's notified the workers that were there.
Yeah, you would hope that would be true,
But we don't know.
but we don't know. One of the things that we really haven't been able to figure out is when there are, this is according to that, what's that emergency thing again?
Emergency management plan?
Yeah. There's supposed to be placards at the site that say what kinds of hazardous materials are inside.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't been on the property, but we walked around, say, half of it where we have public access. We have never seen any placards.
Well,
Not on the fence or around the fence or anything.
there probably would be more so inside on the
Well,
walls.
if you were, the purpose of the placards is to alert the first responder.
Right, so
This
they
is
know
what
what.
we're up against.
Put on your respirators, guys.
Yeah,
girls.
so you gotta go inside
Mhm.
to find the placard. That
Yeah, makes
doesn't
sense.
seem right.
Well, let me ask the question. Whose emergency management plan is it? Is it the factories and it has to be approved by the municipality? Or is it the municipality who says, you're having this type of business here, this is what you must do?
This is what we're planning to sit down with the county emergency administrators to figure out who makes the plan and when it's reviewed and who has a copy in their office.
You're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network, and we have Mr. Spencer Wills and Mr. Andre White talking about environmental health issues. We're going to sort of wrap it up here. I'm Columbo again. I probably come up with 15,000 more questions here. Where's the breakdown here? Is it been remiss over the last 40, I don't know how long, I assume it's been there, over the last 40 years that the county somebody was being paid and said,
Yeah,
with the city, with the empty box, the monitor that's not turned on? And I'm just asking, does anybody have a copy? Can the city of Cleveland give you a copy, or do they have an existing box? Do I have to climb that pole every day and flip the switch or leave the switch on? And when I go up there and collect the samples, I turn it off, take the sample out, put it in my tube or whatever, and turn the switch back on? And again, I'm just asking, not saying you guys haven't thought. I would like to see what the box looked like.
Yeah,
Well, we tried to, but we got
No, not,
we got
well, somebody in
twisted
the,
around.
somebody in the city should know what type of box that is.
Yes,
And maybe they have,
somebody does.
and it might be a box from 1930, I don't know. Nobody knows.
Well, once again, there's two boxes. You have the one with the filter, and then you have the laser. So I told Spencer, now you know the city ain't gonna put no money into no laser box, so it might be a filter up there. Yeah.
That's our theory.
Yeah.
We're sticking with it.
Well, I just in a
No,
relationship,
but
there were cameras in the city of Cleveland without batteries, so, yeah.
No, I
Somewhat agree.
think these are all good questions, and I think it's stuff that we want to do. But I think we want to work methodically. One reason why we didn't go, one reason why we didn't make a bigger issue out of it, one reason why we didn't go confront the mayor or the police chief was we didn't feel confident that we had the smoking gun to say, here it is, here's the facts.
Mhm.
And honestly, that really is the responsibility of the regulatory agencies.
Well, regulatory means that they do things regularly, they monitor things.
But
Apparently, this is the irregular organizations.
yeah,
entities.
and our president, Ivanka Hall from Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition, Ivanka has made the point that there was a dynamic difference between what happened to the primarily white community in East Palestine and the predominantly African American community in Oakwood. Now, we don't have any proof of this, but if it walks like a duck, you gotta at least say, Ohio EPA, where were you? What were you doing? And when they say to us, well, that was the fire chief's responsibility to, take charge of the scene, and that certainly is not the same as happened in East Palestine.
Okay, and you're saying that East Palestine is a predominantly white community,
Absolutely.
and you're saying Oakwood is a predominantly black
About
community?
60-40.
60% black, 40%. Okay, and I'm not going to argue or debate that with you or anybody else.
Certainly is a factor to take into consideration. So we want to continue to have the facts before we have the discussion, and we're still missing some facts, but we're going to be out there looking at it.
Okay, you're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network. And again, we have Mr. Spencer Wells and Mr. Andre White talking about environmental health issues. See, one of the demographics across Northeast Ohio, Greater Cleveland, are changing. Okay. The city of Cleveland is a predominantly black-brown city now. And you have a black mayor. You've had a previous mayor for 16 years who was black. And we'll skip over Jane Campbell. She was only there 4 years. And we had another mayor there who was 8 years who happened to be black. We almost have a even split on the legislative body in city council in Cleveland. You didn't say this. I just want the audience to consider this here. We have African Americans who represent African Americans, but they're not representing us with the best interests.
I'm going to defer to Andre.
No, I'm not.
No, he has strong feelings about this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. If you want to comment, that's my comment. And my comments are, go ahead.
I'm gonna take my class hat off and put my civilian hat on. I believe that statement is true. That we don't have anyone that representing us deal with these issues, and we did reach out to certain elected officials, and they never responded back. Especially issues dealing with the county. We sent out letters to the county. We asked them to address the 5 questions that we sent to them, and we still haven't heard from them today. And this is about lead. This is about our children. And
which is sad. I'm not going to address the letters. What I've found over the different cities that I've worked in for part of time is, in some cases, you have elected representatives who just don't care. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna say they just don't care. Some of them just don't understand or don't have the wherewithal to understand, even if you sit there and break it down on the simple level. They just don't understand.
And that's what I would like to address, that I believe that they don't understand and they're afraid to address something if they don't understand it. And let's go back to when we was talking about the air mission. We have a list of individual factories or foundries inside of Cleveland that releases lead into the air.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you think that we can share that with them when they get the idea? I don't think so.
Well, I created a new saying. Everybody's heard of low-hanging fruit. That's where you pick the apples off the lowest tree, branch. Certain elected officials pick up the rotten fruit that's off the ground. That's the easy thing to do. Sometimes you have to get the ladder to climb up, because if all the apples are picked off the lowest branch, you got to climb up to get the better fruit. When somebody says, well, they don't understand, that's why you bring people in, such as YouTube or whoever, and you can break it down, make it as simple as possible. How much simpler can you make 0 plus 0 is 0? 0 plus 0 does not equal 100. It never will. I don't care what nation or country you live in. They have to be willing to face the facts. I have had on the Body Talk Radio Network, Mr. Spencer Wells and Andre White talking about class, and also addressing environmental health issues. Keeping with the Minority Health Week, here are a couple of health heroes. Dr. George Benjamin, he is the CEO and executive publisher of the American Public Health Association. He also served as the Secretary of Health in the state of Maryland. He was the gentleman who brought managed Medicaid, which means an HMO concept, to the state of Maryland. The other one is Dr. Pamela Murphy. She is a graduate of Case Western Reserve University Medical School. She is board certified in family practice, and she is a physician with the Metro Health Network. She works out of the Rockside office. She's an excellent physician. I know her personally, and I'm just not giving her name because of that. She's one of the few Black primary care physicians in Cleveland. The other gentleman is by the name of Dr. Victor Garcia. He's a West Point graduate, honor grad, matter of fact. Victor is 6 feet 7 inches tall, and no, he did not play basketball. After graduating from West Point, he was accepted to go to medical school. When he completed medical school, his residency program was in pediatric surgery. And Dr. Garcia, if you can imagine a gentleman who was 6'7", his hands are big as some infants. He was stationed at Walter Reed as a pediatric surgeon. He was also used by different branches of the military. Victor flew across the country, across the world. Sometimes the babies were flown in with the parents for him to operate on them. I met Victor when I was at Dr. Garcia, but I call him Vic. I met Victor when I was at Bethesda. And I looked at him, and I looked up at him actually. And I said, how do you operate on children as big as your hands are? He said, come in the operating room with me. I went in the operating room with him. And if you want to talk about seeing somebody who's skilled, do procedures, I'm talking about on infants and children. Okay? You want to see this man operate. Victor, separated from the military, he's in Cincinnati now. He's at the University of Cincinnati Health and Hospital System. Let me go back for a minute. He was trained by Dr. C. Everett Koop. A lot of people don't know Dr. Koop was a pediatric surgeon. Dr. Koop, if I may practice, he learned his early surgical skills as a kid, operating on pregnant cats. And he mastered certain techniques that other pediatric surgeons, when he became a full-fledged physician, that he trained, and he was one of the instructors for Dr. Garcia. And I had the opportunity to work with both of them, more so Dr. Coop. Victor he's highly sought after, as I said, as a consultant on pediatric cases, nationally and internationally. Now with the advent of Zoom or whatever else, Facebook, they send him, you can fax x-rays, he looks at them, says you need to do this, and sometimes he actually will leave the university to help. He's one of the top pediatric surgeons in the country. Very humble guy. If you walked in here now, you would not know he's a doctor, but you know who he is because you got to look up at him. 6'7". He's the founding director of the trauma services at the University Cincinnati Hospital System. When he landed there, that was one of the first things he did because children, young kids, teenagers, more so, were being they had trauma, car accidents, gunshot wounds, whatever. He created the trauma program at this hospital, Dr. Victor Garcia. I would like to thank again the two guests, Mr. Spencer Wells and Audrey White, for sharing environmental health issues. Sometime in the immediate future, we're going to have somebody that's going to come in and talk about financial health. Real quick, you see the two books on the table. The first book there, the small one, is The ABCs of Inspiration. That was written by Mr. Anthony Wise. He's going to be a guest on this show in May. The other book, this big one, it's titled Jazz, The History of Americans Music, which jazz we own. It was written by Jeffrey Ward and Ken Burns. If you are a jazz aficionado, I highly recommend both books. But the gentleman who wrote the first book will be on the show. I believe it was the second week in May. And I want you to stay tuned for the month of May. The first Tuesday, which I believe is the second, we're going to have the Body Talk Power Panel, the second one, and we have some excellent panelists this time again. And again, I would thank the listeners, and if you're listening or watching on Facebook or YouTube or whatever platform, be sure you hit the thumbs up button, and I will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I forgot to give you, there's a $25 gift card in there. Well, you guys did good, I hope.
We'd like to thank you for tuning in to Body Talk with your host, Al Bridges, here on the station where we don't bring no static, but we should not bring the noise on staticradio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media where we absolutely love to hear from you on Facebook.com/No Static Radio LLC, on Twitter at No Static _ radio, on Instagram, The Real _ No Static Radio, and on YouTube at No Static Radio. Also, if you guys would like to listen to replays of this show and others on NoStaticRadio.net, please make sure you check us out on Mixer or Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio in the toolbar, all one word, for replays of this show and all others on the platform. And for continuous streaming, check us out on TuneIn.com, LiveOnlineRadio.net, or Mediocre for continuous streaming, uninterrupted, no refreshing of this show and all others on the platform. Just type in No Static Radio, all one word, in the toolbar, and you'll find us. And for all things on Static Radio, including up and coming events, merchandise, and the in-depth look at all our great show hosts and more, please check out our website at www.nostaticradio.net. Thank you so much again for tuning in to Body Talk. And you know what it is, we got more music for your listening pleasure. And later on this evening, you can also join us with the Reverend Doctor for today's gospel music show here on Your Voice of the Revolution on staticradio.net, powered by Google, partnered with Colors, and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines and Hot Girls Gear. You guys be safe, have a good one, and enjoy.
Yeah, you guys did good. Without any doubt.